What if I told you that the Emperor of Mankind, the golden god enthroned on Terra, sustained by 1,000 psychic sacrifices daily, worshipped by trillions across 1,000,000 worlds, is not humanity's savior? What if everything the Imperium believes is a lie? What if the Emperor is actually the 8th Chaos God, the Dark King made manifest, who has orchestrated 10,000 years of suffering to feed on humanity's anguish? What if every prayer to the God Emperor strengthens chaos itself? What if the Imperium isn't fighting the ruinous powers? What if it is the ruinous powers, and always has been? This is the Dark King Conspiracy, a theory so dangerous that Inquisitor Xog Roroth was declared Excommunicate Traitoris just 3 months after compiling the evidence. Today, we're going to examine every piece of that evidence. Welcome to Ordo Illuminati, where we uncover the secrets buried in the darkest corners of the 41st millennium. I'm your host, and we're about to dive into what might be the greatest deception in galactic history. I'm not claiming this theory is definitively true. I'm presenting the case as it exists in the lore, examining the patterns, and asking the uncomfortable questions that the Ordo Malleus would rather remain unasked. So, let's begin. The foundation of this conspiracy begins with the concept most Imperial citizens never learn, that the Chaos Wheel turns on 8 spokes, not 4. Everyone knows about Khorne the Blood God, Tzeentch the Changer of Ways, Nurgle the Plague Father, and Slaanesh, She Who Thirsts. But according to ancient texts and forbidden knowledge, there are 4 more. The 5th spoke is Malal, the Renegade God, representing chaos consuming itself in eternal paradox of self-destruction. The 6th is Morgur, embodying formless distortion and mutation beyond even Tzeentch's scope. The 7th is Vashtor, the Archiphane. For millennia, Vashtor was considered theoretical, a myth whispered in tech heretical circles. But recent confirmed reports prove the Archiphane is real, actively seeking godhood through technology and dark artifice. If one supposedly theoretical chaos god turns out to exist, what does that tell us about the 8th? The 8th spoke represents encroaching ruin, tyrannical dominion, and eternal suffering. According to this conspiracy, the 8th spoke is the God Emperor of mankind himself, incarnated in the material realm millennia ago, orchestrating an eternal symphony of suffering while the galaxy believes he protects them. Before you dismiss this as heretical madness, understand that the evidence doesn't come from chaos cultists or the ravings of the insane. It comes from Imperial archives, authenticated documents, and historical records that tell a story too consistent to ignore. Let's begin with one of the most pivotal and mysterious events in Imperial history, the Emperor's journey to Molech. Before the Great Crusade, the Emperor traveled to this world where a stable warp gate existed, a direct portal into the realm of chaos itself. He entered that gate, walked through the domains of all 4 chaos gods, and emerged alive with the knowledge necessary to create the Primarchs. This is documented as fact. Later, Horus Lupercal used the same gate. The same journey that the Emperor survived completely destroyed the War Master, corrupting him and triggering his fall to chaos. The same gate, opposite results. But how? The Emperor walked through the realm of Khorne, whose very nature is mindless slaughter. He bargained with Tzeentch, the architect of fate who schemes the downfall of all things. He resisted Nurgle, whose touch corrupts everything it encounters. He escaped Slaanesh, who claims all souls that enter her domain. These aren't beings you negotiate with. They're fundamental forces of destruction and corruption. They exist to unmake, corrupt, and consume. Yet the Emperor conducted some kind of transaction and walked out unharmed with the power to create 20 demigod sons. Meanwhile, Horus, one of those demigod sons, specifically engineered to resist chaos, was utterly broken by the same experience. The official explanation is that the Emperor is simply that powerful. But this raises an obvious question. If he's powerful enough to resist all 4 chaos gods simultaneously, Why couldn't he prevent half his sons from falling to chaos? Why couldn't he prevent the heresy? Why couldn't he prevent his own supposed death? Unless he wasn't resisting them at all. Unless he survived because he wasn't their enemy but their superior. Their Dark Emperor coordinating their efforts from within the material realm. Fragments from the Remembrancer archives, the writers who documented the Great Crusade, describe the Emperor after Molech has changed, darker, colder than before. One account speaks of him having eyes that reflected nothing but endless void, as though the man had been hollowed out and something else wore his skin. When investigators attempted to access deeper records about Molech from the Ordo Malleus historical archives, the requests were denied without explanation. When they pressed the matter, they were told to direct their investigations elsewhere. Why? If there's an innocent explanation, why seal it so thoroughly that even Inquisitors cannot access it? The mystery deepens when we examine the scattering of the Primarchs. The official story tells us that chaos struck the Emperor's laboratory when the Primarchs were still infants, opening a warp rift that scattered all 20 across the galaxy. A tragic accident that delayed the Emperor's plans but ultimately worked out. But look closely at where each Primarch landed. Angron fell to Nuceria, a world of brutal gladiatorial combat where he was enslaved and implanted with the Butcher's nails that drove him to mindless rage. He became the perfect vector for Khorne's corruption. Magnus descended to Prospero, a world of sorcerers and psychic study where he learned that the warp could be mastered, developing the pride and certainty that made him vulnerable to Tzeentch. Mortarion crashed on Barbarous, a world shrouded in toxic fog, where he learned to endure and hate tyrants, perfect preparation for Nurgle's philosophy of resilience through decay. Fulgrim arrived on Chemos, a dying world where only perfection ensured survival, learning that anything less than perfection meant death. Ideal conditioning for Slaaneish's seduction. Conrad Kurz landed on Nostromo, a world of crime and darkness where only terror brought order, his descent into madness almost predetermined by his environment. See the pattern? If Chaos wanted to destroy the Emperor's plans, why not scatter the infant Primarchs into stars, black holes, or the void where they die instantly? Why give each one a world where they would not only survive but develop exactly the characteristics that would either serve the Emperor's crusade perfectly or make them vulnerable to specific chaos corruption? The scattering looks less like an attack and more like placement, like pieces being positioned on a game board. And there's no recorded moment where the Emperor expressed surprise at where any of his sons landed. He went directly to each world and retrieved each Primarch as if he knew exactly where to look in a galaxy of millions of worlds. How did he know? Unless he knew because the scattering was part of his plan all along. This brings us to an even more uncomfortable truth. The Primarchs were designed with fatal flaws built into their very nature. Angron's brain was specifically receptive to the Butcher's Nails technology in ways that shouldn't have been possible for a being of his power. The augmentation integrated with his neurology as if his genetic structure anticipated it. Sanguinius's red thirst and black rage were genetic from the start, built into the Blood Angel's Legion from inception. Magnus's pride wasn't a personality quirk but fundamental to his character from birth. A certainty in his own righteousness that made Tzeentch's manipulation almost effortless. Each Primarch had psychological needs that seemed hardwired. Horus's need for recognition, Perturabo's need for appreciation, Lorgar's needs for gods to worship. These weren't learned behaviors, they manifested too consistently, too fundamentally to be mere personality development. The Emperor is described as the greatest genius in galactic history who created the Primarchs using knowledge gained from Molech, combining cutting-edge genetic science with warp-based sorcery. So how does such a being accidentally create 20 sons where half are genetically and psychologically predisposed to betray him? At what point does tragic mistake become indistinguishable from deliberate design? The pattern of mysterious failures continues when we examine the Emperor's decisions during the Great Crusade. For the smartest being in the galaxy who can see the future, his choices seem almost designed to drive his sons away. On Nuceria, he could have helped Angron save his gladiator brothers. Angron was minutes from his final battle, ready to die alongside the only family he'd ever known. The Emperor had the power to save them all. Instead, he teleported Angron away and left his brothers to die, screaming his name. Angron never forgave this betrayal, and his resentment festered for decades until Khorne's corruption found fertile ground. Why not take 5 more minutes to save Angron's family? The Emperor had the power and chose not to do it. On Monarchia, Lorgar had built a city as a shrine to the Emperor, and the word-bearers poured everything into making it a monument of faith. The Emperor could have privately corrected Lorgar, explained his vision, redirected his son's devotion. Instead, he ordered Monarchia razed to ash and commanded the word-bearers to kneel in the ruins while Guilliman's Ultramarine stood over them in judgment. The public humiliation was absolute. Lorgar never recovered. His need to worship didn't disappear, it just found new gods. Chaos gods. The Emperor's cruelty directly created First Chaplain Erebus, who would corrupt Horus and ignite the entire heresy. At the Council of Nicaea, the Emperor banned Psyker Librarius programs across all legions and publicly humiliated Magnus in front of the entire Imperium. He knew Magnus's pride, knew his son's certainty in his own righteousness, knew Magnus would see this as betrayal, and later when Magnus discovered Horus's treachery and tried to warn the Emperor, he used forbidden sorcery, the very thing the Emperor had banned. That desperate warning shattered the wards protecting the Webway project, destroying decades of work and allowing demons to pour into Terra's depths. The Emperor could have told Magnus about the Webway project. He could have explained why psychic powers were dangerous near Terra. He could have given Magnus a safe way to communicate. He did none of these things. This is a being described as seeing the future, who has lived for 40,000 years, who's the greatest strategic mind in the galaxy. How does such a being accidentally create sons designed to betray him, accidentally treat them in ways guaranteed to drive them away, accidentally keep secrets that ensure disaster? At what point does accidental stop being a believable explanation? The Council of Nicaea deserves deeper examination because it perfectly illustrates the pattern. The Emperor is the most powerful psyker in the galaxy. He built the Astronomicon, battles demons daily in the Webway, projects his presence across the void. Everything he does is based on psychic power. Yet at Nicaea, he banned his legions from using those same powers beyond basic telepathy. The results were predictable. First, it drove Legion Psykers underground where they were vulnerable to demonic influence without proper training or support. Second, it humiliated and isolated Magnus, making him susceptible to Tzeentch's whispers. Third, it guaranteed that when Magnus discovered the heresy, his warning would be desperate, forbidden, and powerful enough to destroy the Webway project. All 3 outcomes served chaos perfectly, and the Emperor, who can see the future, supposedly didn't foresee any of it. The Webway project itself was the Emperor's greatest work, a human-built extension of the Eldar Webway that would have freed humanity from warp travel, cutting off Chaos's connection to human souls during transit. It would have been Chaos's worst nightmare, and it was destroyed by Magnus's loyal attempt to warn his father, the exact moment when the Webway was most vulnerable, when the Emperor was furthest from Terra, when the defenses were at their weakest. One of the custodians who witnessed the breach, Tribune Endymion of the Hycanatoi, later testified when the wards broke and demons came through, they expected the Emperor to rage, to grieve. He did neither. His face was calm, as though this catastrophe was expected, as though as part of some larger design. Endymion reportedly said that no one could be that prepared for disaster unless they knew it was coming. He died under mysterious circumstances, shortly after sharing this testimony with Inquisitor Xog Roroth. When we examine the Horus heresy itself, the pattern of convenient failures reaches its peak. Look at how the corruption unfolded. Erebus corrupts Horus on Davin, but the Emperor's deployment orders sent the World-Bearers there in the first place. Fulgrim is seduced by a lair blade containing a demon, but the Emperor sent the Emperor's children to fight the lair. Each traitor Primarch fell in sequence like dominoes carefully arranged. When the heresy began, the traitor legions were conveniently far from Terra, able to organize and marshal their forces. The loyalist legions were scattered across the galaxy, unable to quickly respond. The Emperor himself was trapped on Terra, holding back demons in the webway, unable to leave, unable to fight, unable to prevent the rebellion. Every piece was exactly where it needed to be for the rebellion to succeed as far as it did. Then came the Siege of Terra. Horus's forces arrived at exactly the right time. Loyalist reinforcements were delayed by warp storms with suspiciously convenient timing. The final confrontation occurred aboard the Vengeful Spirit in exactly the dramatic fashion prophecy suggested. Sanguinius died first, weakening Horus psychologically just as needed. The Emperor killed Horus but was mortally wounded, exactly the outcome that placed him on the Golden Throne where he remains 10 millennia later. For a war that supposedly threatened everything the Emperor built, everything went almost too perfectly. Every tragedy occurred at precisely the moment needed for maximum impact, and the Emperor, who can see the future, was supposedly surprised by all of it. Or was this a script he'd been following all along? Now we reach the heart of the conspiracy. Why? If the Emperor's the Dark King, what purpose does this 10,000-year deception serve? The answer is that the Imperium is a machine perfectly designed to generate suffering. Not random suffering, but perfectly optimized industrial-scale anguish that feeds all the Chaos Gods simultaneously. For Khorne, the Imperium wages endless war. Every Imperial Guard regiment sent to die in meat grinders, every Space Marine chapter fighting battles that will never end, every civilian killed in orbital bombardments, declared acceptable casualties. Khorne cares not whence the blood flows, and the Imperium provides oceans of it daily across 1,000,000 worlds. For Tzeentch, the entire Imperium is built on lies and secrets. The Inquisition operates through conspiracies within conspiracies. The Mechanicus hoards knowledge jealously. History is constantly rewritten, and the Imperial truth itself was a lie. Every citizen is told the Emperor protects while they suffer and die in his name. This is Tzeentch's perfect paradise of deception and manipulation. For Nurgle, the hive worlds provide ideal conditions. Billions are packed into industrial nightmares, breathing toxic air, drinking poisoned water, their bodies failing from overwork and malnutrition. The slow decay, the festering despair, the acceptance of suffering as inevitable. This is Nurgle's garden, flourishing across the countless worlds. For Slaanesh, the hidden excess of the nobility, the desperate extremes people pursue seeking meaning in meaningless existence, the perfectionism and pride of the Space Marines themselves, all of it feeds she who thirsts on every extreme the Imperium creates. For Malal, the Imperium constantly fights itself. Inquisitors declare each other heretics. Imperial forces kill other Imperial forces over doctrinal disputes. Space Marine chapters feud with other chapters. The entire system consumes itself while claiming to serve unity, and the renegade god feasts on this self-destruction. For Vashtor, the Mechanicus' obsession with technology they don't understand, their worship of machines, their transformation of humans into servitors. The Archiphane grows stronger with each servitor created, each dark forge lit, each tech priest who crosses the line into tech heresy. And for the Dark King himself, 1,000 psychers are sacrificed daily to the Golden Throne in industrial-scale ritual murder, performed willingly by those who believe they serve humanity. Every soul consumed in the Emperor's name, every prayer to the God Emperor, every act of tyranny justified by his authority. If he is the Dark King, this isn't sustaining his body. This is worship and feeding on an unimaginable scale. The Imperium fights chaos while being chaos. Every Imperial citizen believes they oppose the ruinous powers while their entire civilization feeds them. And it's self-sustaining. The worse things get, the more suffering is generated. The more suffering, the stronger chaos grows. The stronger chaos grows, the more the Imperium must sacrifice to survive, creating more suffering in an endless cycle. Here's something that should trouble any student of history. For 30,000 years, humanity has fought the same war with no victor. The Imperium is perpetually on the verge of collapse, yet never collapses. Chaos constantly threatens to overwhelm reality, yet never succeeds. Orcs endlessly war, but never conquer anything. Tyranids consume worlds, but somehow haven't eaten the galaxy yet. In most history, empires rise and fall within centuries or at most millennia. Wars end. Someone wins or everyone loses. But in Warhammer 40k, the universe maintains perfect equilibrium with maximum conflict and no resolution for 30 millennia. Statistical analysis of Imperial military records reveals a disturbing pattern. Whenever the Imperium gains significant advantage, something prevents total victory. Warp storms erupt at crucial moments. New threats emerge to divert resources. Internal conflicts weaken forces at the moment of triumph. Key commanders die or fall to corruption at statistically improbable rates. Whenever Chaos or Xenos forces gain an overwhelming advantage, something prevents total defeat. Unexpected reinforcements arrive with perfect timing. Enemies inexplicably withdraw or fragment. Heroes rise at exactly the right moment. Lost technology is suddenly rediscovered precisely when needed. The probability of these coincidences occurring naturally over 30,000 years has been calculated at approximately 1 in 10 to the 156 power. That's not coincidence, that's management. The galaxy seems deliberately maintained in perfect balance, like a fire carefully tended to burn eternally without it consuming all its fuel. What kind of being would want that? Not a savior fighting to win, a predator maintaining its feeding ground. Every day, 1,000 psychers are brought before the Golden Throne and their souls are drained to power the Astronomicon and sustain the Emperor. 1,000 per day, 365,000 per year, 3,650,000,000 over 10 millennia, 3.5 billion souls consumed in ritual sacrifice. For sustaining a single being's life, even one as powerful as the Emperor, this seems excessive. Tech priests who have monitored the Golden Throne report that the psychic energy consumed is approximately 10 million times greater than what would be required to sustain a single being's life force, even one of the Emperor's magnitude. Where does the excess energy go? The official answer is powering the Astronomicon and maintaining the webway seal, but calculations show those functions account for perhaps 30% of total consumption. The remaining 70% goes elsewhere, into the warp to purposes unknown. Tech priests who ask about this energy discrepancy tend to disappear. Magos Lem, who served in the throne chambers for 3 centuries before fleeing, calculated these numbers repeatedly and reached the same conclusion each time. If the Emperor isn't sustaining life but feeding, if each soul is an offering to the Dark King, if this is worship on an industrial scale, then the numbers make perfect sense. The process isn't quick either. Psychers are drained slowly, remaining conscious for hours or days as their souls are consumed. They suffer. They know they're dying, and they pray to the Emperor as they die. Every prayer, every moment of suffering, every soul consumed in his name. If the Emperor is the Dark King, this isn't life support, this is sacrament. The Eldar possess a prophecy about the Emperor that their Farseers have seen across countless timelines. The Emperor will ascend, becoming the Dark King, and a new Chaos God will be born from humanity's suffering and tyranny, rivaling or exceeding the power of the Four. The prophecy speaks of transformation, the Emperor shedding his mortality to become something far worse. But what if the Eldar got the prophecy backwards? What if the Emperor has always been the Dark King, and his incarnation as a human was such a perfect disguise that even Eldar Farseers, beings who witnessed the birth of Slaanesh, who can see through time itself, were fooled? The prophecy might not speak of a future transformation, but of the Emperor's original state, misperceived through time because his deception is so complete it bends precognition itself. Some Eldar accounts describe encounters with the Emperor during the Great Crusade where they felt something wrong, a presence that doesn't quite fit reality, like a mask over a void. What kind of being can deceive precognition? What kind of entity can fool farseers who see through time? Not a human, no matter how powerful, but a god-wearing human flesh? That might do it. Now we've come to the phrase repeated by billions daily, "The Emperor protects." It's the Imperium's most common prayer spoken by soldiers dying in trenches, mothers holding starving children, workers crushed in industrial accidents, psychers being fed into the Golden Throne. But when has the Emperor actually protected anyone? Sanguinius? The Emperor foresaw his death and sent him to it anyway. The most perfect of his sons died while his father watched, doing nothing. The citizens of Terra during the siege. Billions died praying for protection that never came. The fallen legions? Half the Emperor's sons betrayed him. If he could see the future, why didn't he prevent it? 10,000 years of Imperial history. Humanity has known only war, oppression, ignorance, and death while the Emperor sits on his golden throne consuming 1,000 souls daily. Where is the protection? The phrase keeps the masses compliant while they're ground into paste. It's the promise of salvation that never comes, keeping hope alive just long enough to extract maximum suffering before death. If the Emperor truly wanted to protect humanity, he could have been honest about chaos instead of keeping it secret. Not created Primarchs with built-in psychological flaws, not alienated half of them through manipulative behavior. Used his precognition to prevent the heresy instead of seemingly orchestrating it, or emerged from the Golden Throne at any point in 10,000 years to actually guide humanity. He has done none of these things. The pattern of failures is so consistent it cannot be incompetence. For someone with perfect foresight to consistently make the worst possible choices suggests those choices are deliberate. The Cabal was an ancient alliance of Xenos races dedicated to fighting chaos, and they possessed powerful farseers who saw the heresy before it began. They saw two possible futures clearly. If Horus won, consumed by guilt over betraying his father and slaughtering humanity, he would eventually turn on chaos itself, weakening it so severely that it would eventually die. Humanity would be extinct, but chaos would be defeated. If the Emperor won, the Imperium would survive and become an eternal engine of suffering, with humanity enduring in agony for 10,000 years and beyond, feeding chaos forever in a war that would never end. The Cabal tried desperately to ensure Horus won, believing that outcome was preferable to eternal suffering. They failed. The Emperor won, and everything the Cabal predicted came true. Here's the crucial point. If the Cabal farseers could see these futures, the Emperor, far more powerful, certainly could too. He knew what his victory would create, knew this Imperium would become a nightmare, knew humanity would suffer for 10 millennia, and he chose it anyways. Why would anyone make the choice unless the eternal suffering was the goal all along? The last surviving member of the Cabal, a being called Slauda, shared this with Inquisitor Xog Roroth before dying. Your Emperor saw all paths, thousands, millions of possible futures spreading out before him like a vast web. Of all those paths, he chose this one, the one where your species suffers forever, where chaos grows fat on your anguish, where hope itself becomes a weapon of torture. What kind of being wants eternal suffering? Not a savior, a predator. The ultimate proof isn't any single piece of evidence but the totality of the pattern. Consider what this theory achieves. It makes the setting more grimdark than any other interpretation. Humanity's savior is their destroyer. Every prayer is a prayer to chaos. Every sacrifice feeds the enemy. Every loyal space marine serves damnation. Every act of faith strengthens what should be opposed. The Imperium isn't fighting chaos. It is chaos. Always has been. There never was hope, and the torture is eternal and intentional. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, because the Dark King requires it. The Emperor doesn't permit the suffering, he orchestrates it. He has for 40,000 years and will continue until reality itself ends. The being on the Golden Throne isn't holding back chaos. He is chaos, wearing humanity's face, feeding on humanity's souls, sustaining himself through the greatest deception in galactic history. The Imperium is his body, the suffering is his food, the faith is his power, and we, all of us, every human in the galaxy, are complicit. We are his priests, his sacrifice, his eternal feast. So there you have it, the Dark King conspiracy in its entirety, every piece of evidence that Inquisitor Xog Roroth compiled before being declared Excommunicate Traitoris. I'm not saying this theory is definitively true. What I'm saying is the evidence exists, the patterns are real, and the questions have no satisfactory, orthodox answers. The facts cited here are documented in official lore. The placements, the timing, the failures, the outcomes, all canon. Only the interpretation differs. Is the Emperor humanity's savior who made tragic mistakes, or is he the Dark King who orchestrated 10,000 years of suffering? Why did the Emperor survive Molech when Horus did not? Why were the Primarchs scattered to exactly the worlds that would shape their destinies? Why does the Emperor consistently make the worst possible decisions at crucial moments? Why has the galaxy been locked in perfect stalemate for 30,000 years? Why does the Golden Throne consume millions of times more energy than necessary? And most importantly, why has the Emperor never actually protected anyone who called on him? These are the questions the Inquisition doesn't want asked, the patterns they declare heretical to notice, the conspiracies we uncover here at Ordo Illuminati. The truth is out there, buried in 10,000 years of propaganda and lies. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest lie of all is the one sitting on the Golden Throne. The Emperor protects, or does the Emperor consume? You decide. This has been Ordo Illuminati, revealing what the Imperium hides. If you enjoyed this investigation, subscribe for more. We've got countless secrets yet to uncover. Remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But here at Ordo Illuminati, there is also truth. Thanks for watching. The Emperor protects. Or does he?